Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Karishma Patel and I'm your host for Unscripted. And today I have a very special guest and let's just get into it. Omika Jikaria, welcome to Unscripted. It's so weird because it's so weird to keep saying that because I just changed my name last week.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So I was about to say my old name
and then you're like,
time.
wait,
yeah,
it changed.
But yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So how are you? Please tell the audience who you are, why'd you move to Austin, and what do you do?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. So I am originally from New York City. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. That's where my parents moved from India. And I loved growing up there, was there until I was 18, and then went to college in DC, moved around a bunch. I actually lived in Austin like 10 years ago when I moved for my first job. I was working at Facebook. And then I moved to Asia for 3 years. So I was living in Cambodia. I lived in India. I was doing nonprofit social entrepreneurship work there. And then moved back to the U.S. Right before COVID to go to business school. So I went to Dartmouth to get my MBA. And then I lived in Boston and New York, was kind of closer to my family. And I was working in consulting. And then very randomly, actually, when I moved back to New York in 2022, I had been away for 11 years. And I thought, I'm going to be there forever. Like I really wanted to be back after being away for so long. And I was single at the time. And then very randomly, I got introduced to my now partner who was living in Austin. So it was very serendipitous, not something that I was kind of planning for or anything. But we got connected through a mutual friend. And then we started talking, just realized we had so much in common, and started a long distance relationship, which was insane because it was not something I was, hoping for or planning for. And so we were long distance for almost 2 years. And then we were kind of thinking, where do we want to be? He was in Austin. I had come here a bunch. And honestly, I was feeling a little bit burnt out from being in New York, just the hustle culture and, just living right in the city. It was really exhausting. My job was very exhausting, like honestly, soul sucking. So there were a lot of things that, New York is wonderful, but I was kind of open. They always say, like, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your 5-year plan and he'll have another one for you. So that's kind of what happened. I moved to New York thinking I would be there forever. And then he came into my life and I moved here this past summer. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind. 2024 was a lot of personal change, moving, changing jobs, and just going through a lot of big transitions after I turned 30.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to Austin.
Thank you.
Was the mutual friend Shruti?
It was Aish.
Aish.
Yeah.
Yes, you told me about that.
Yeah.
You told me about that. Sorry.
Yeah.
She came on my podcast a few months ago too, and it was so incredible. We did some tapping stuff.
Yes.
And I was like, what? This is crazy.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's so powerful.
How does it feel to be in Austin? Is it way different from New York? Obviously.
Yes, it is. Very different. So like I mentioned, I lived here 10 years ago, and that time I was just out of college. And so I was in a different phase of life. Like I was living downtown. I was working in person downtown in tech. I feel like back then it was very much like you're friends with all your coworkers. You're like going out every Friday with them. You're doing happy hour. I feel like I just had no responsibilities. Yeah. It was really fun. I was like dancing all the time and just doing so many things. And then now, of course, 9-10 years later, the city has changed a lot. So there's an actual skyline and there's like all these bigger chains. So that's really cool. It definitely feels more modern. I feel like there are a lot more transplants from the coast as well. And then I think on a personal note, like I just feel like a completely different person.
Yeah.
I just lived so much of life within the years that I was away. And so I feel like I'm more of an adult and my priorities are different and we have more space and we live further away from downtown. So it's just a different experience. It kind of feels like I was here in a past life. It's like a little bit of a mind fuck. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but
you're allowed to curse. I curse a lot.
It was so funny though when Vinay, my partner, where he was living before, turned out to be right next door to the car dealership where I had gotten my first car when I was 21. So it was like a lot of full circle moments and like, just I feel like I've been reincarnated in here.
Well, yeah, because Austin is like also it forces you to slow down because especially when you come from New York, you're probably like on the go.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so Austin's like forced me at least to slow down and also like be present and just be chill.
Yeah.
Is that different for you?
It's really hard. Yeah.
Because you're probably like, can I do this?
Yeah.
Like,
I feel it's funny because I actually got more into wellness and mindfulness when I lived in Austin 10 years ago. Like that's when I got introduced to a lot of it. And that was, I was like 21. And that was so different for me. And I was like amazed because growing up in New York City, like I went to high school in New York City. I was taking the train to school. Like it was just constant. I had never been in nature until I was like 18. Like I never even experienced that. So I was just used to always being like on and adrenaline. And I feel like back then too, I'm not sure if you relate to this, but I feel like people weren't talking about things like mental health or well-being, right?
Yeah.
It's like just as a teenager, it was normal to be stressed and anxious all the time.
Oh, for sure.
And I think for my parents too, like that is, love them so much, but I think for them, like that is a badge of honor, like they want you to like hustle really hard and work hard. And that's kind of what they think leads to success. Yeah. And so,
like that's a lot of Indian parents.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it took me a lot of just unlearning and like healing, to undo a lot of that conditioning. And I think being here is forcing me again to confront some of that and like really make room and space because I'm like not on and it's kind of nice that I have to drive everywhere because it allows me to have that space to actually like think and
chill,
which is really hard because I feel like in New York you're just go on all the time.
Yeah, I feel that because you're also around family, so you really don't have time for yourself or time to yourself because coming from LA, I was around like 100 people. I was telling you, they live in a 10-mile radius.
Oh my gosh.
Not even lying. I grew up with 6 people in my house till I was 25.
Oh my God.
I lived at home even through college. So I started therapy at 22 years old because I was like, I just need to go do this.
Wow.
And since then, I'm with the same therapist. He's amazing. Shout out Patrick. I love him. But we've been doing all this work. And when I got to Austin, it really unraveled because I finally had time to sit there and be like, holy crap, like I have to like now look at my shit and actually do the work. Because when you're around so much chaos, it's really hard to focus on that. But here you're like forced to, and now I'm like, fuck, I love this.
Yeah.
Like, you're forced to look into your inner self, or your inner child, and heal it. And oh my God, inner work is so crazy to me, but it's so beautiful at the same time.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna go through it, I promise you there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, 100%. And I think what's really cool is that, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, like being away from your family now, when you go back to your family, you feel like a different person. And that's when you're most challenged, right? Because you're like, oh, I've done all this work. And then they like trigger you again. And you're like, okay, this is the real work, right? It's not just in isolation.
Yes.
It's like coming back. It's like that whole hero's journey of coming back to yourself and going back to the people and places that shaped you, but as a different person.
Yes. Oh my God. When I'm with family and I get triggered, I have to like do like a little step plan in my fucking head. Like while I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, don't react. Take a deep breath, walk away, come back, or say, hey, I'm gonna just not involve myself in this conversation. It is so hard.
It is really hard.
Because they'll just keep picking at you, right?
They know your triggers. They know all the stuff that bothers you, your insecurities, all of it, right?
Yeah, the other day, actually, I was on the phone with my mom, and she said something, and I was like, look, Mom, that was really mean. And I used to yell, like, because I didn't know how to talk. So, and that's also how I grew up in my household. Everyone just yelled at each other all the time. And I get it. That's just how they grew. That's how they grew up. But I was like, look, Mom, that wasn't very nice, and I didn't like that. That hurt my feelings. And then she didn't say anything because they'll never say sorry. Love her. But, but that's how I had to unlearn that too. Like instead of yelling, just get your point across in a stern voice and move on.
Yeah.
And also you can't expect them to change.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest thing, right? I feel like when you go through all of that healing, initially what happens is you're like, oh, I just want everybody else around me to change. I want them to learn the same things that I've learned. But then you kind of realize it's a lot kinder to not expect them to change and just kind of, it sounds cliche, but be the change you want to see and then
it's so
trust
true.
that other people will maybe react differently, maybe not, but now you have better tools to help them too.
Yeah, expectation also leads to disappointment almost 80% of the time.
Exactly.
And I told some of my cousins too, like, you cannot expect people to understand you because they're probably not even there yet themselves.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a whole nother talk we could go.
Yes, I know. It's a lot.
Well, fun story. Me and Omika met, actually, this is our third time meeting, which is crazy. The first time I met you was at a chocolate making class, and the second time I cried in front of you. And so I was like, fuck, this chick probably thinks I'm crazy.
Oh my gosh, no.
No,
Beautiful.
but you put us through such a beautiful meditation that I haven't been, and actually it was like, what, 20 minutes, I feel like? Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I have not sat like that for 20 minutes and then come out of it like, what? I'm a whole new person.
Aww.
Or calm at least.
Yeah. But
how did you get into like meditation, grounding yourself? Because that was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm glad we got to share that. It all started for me in college. So I was in my first real relationship, as real as can be in college. Yeah. And being the oldest daughter of three, I had never really navigated like dating, or that wasn't really accepted with my parents. I don't know how to talk to them about it. Apparently my dad didn't know about it. I don't know. Anyway, my mom had a lot of issues with it. But I was in this relationship for about 2 years, and it was very tumultuous and just not very mentally safe or stable, really, to be in that space. And so when I got out of that my junior year, I started just looking for answers or looking for something to do for myself. Honestly, it wasn't more complicated than that. And I felt really called to yoga. Like I just started going to yoga classes. I had grown up being a dancer, so that kind of physical aspect of it really resonated with me because I like moving my body and having that somatic experience. So I started going to yoga classes, and that was kind of like just a release. It was purely physical. I didn't know anything about the history behind it, the philosophy, meditation, any of it. But as I started going to more classes, I started learning more about everything else beyond it, right? Yeah. Besides the poses, the asanas. And so that's how I got more introduced to meditation. So it started with the yoga journey, and I was like, oh, I feel really good. I feel better. I feel more clear in my mind. And it was addressing a lot of those anxieties that I had felt as a teenager, kind of like, oh, I can take time for myself, or, it sounds a little cliche, but they'll talk about like self-love and self-care, and it sounds silly, but it's real, right? Just like laying there and like, oh, thank yourself for showing up or for doing something for yourself. I'm like, oh, that's like a really interesting concept that I didn't know you could do, right? So I started doing that, and then and then I got more into meditation. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. This is helping my body, but it's also helping my mind. And so when I lived in Asia, I was 23, and I went to my first 10-day meditation retreat. It was a Vipassana retreat, so it's a 10-day silent meditation because I was really interested in.
You didn't talk for 10
I did not talk for 10 days.
No phone, no nothing.
No phone, no writing, no exercise.
I was telling my mom, let's do a 3-day. You did 10 days.
Yeah. So I did 10 days because I was just interested in going deeper, and it was absolutely the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most life-changing. I just learned a lot. I think everyone gets something different out of it, and it's like hard to go into it with expectations. But just the stillness, the clarity, and creating that space. I mean, it was really, really challenging to sit with your own thoughts. I feel like, in our modern world, we're constantly running away. Like boredom is not something that is embraced, even with little kids, right? They're constantly entertained, or they're on their iPads, and we don't allow people to be bored from when they're young. But I found that when you allow yourself to be bored is actually when you're able to be most creative, and when you're not like thinking so deeply about a problem, and when you spend time away from it is when the best solutions come out. So it taught me about just allowing that space, sitting with discomfort. I think that was a really big thing too, just kind of training your mind to be okay with the unknown, be okay with being really uncomfortable, because then what it does is it kind of rewires the pathways in your brain so that when you are in a real life situation where you are uncertain about something, exactly, and it just forces you to be more present and have more faith and openness and the different possibilities that exist. So that was kind of the start of it, and then I just loved it so much that I continued sitting and trying to learn more, and then that brought me into more energy healing, and I started to learn about that, and it's just been my anchor, especially through all of the moves and all of the people and places in my life. It's kind of the one constant that keeps me going.
Wow. I'm still stuck on the 10-day silent retreat. That's amazing.
Yeah, they have them all over the world. They have a lot of different centers, and what's really cool about it is it's fully donation based. So there's no, I feel like a lot of wellness nowadays is super commodified and you have to pay so much money and it's like very fancy and luxurious, which, that's great. I've done some of that too. But what's really beautiful about this is it's so pure. It's no frills. Like it's not fancy. It's just, all right, shut up and sit down and listen to your brain.
Were there other people with you there too?
Yeah, so there were a bunch of other people, but you don't talk to anyone. You don't make eye contact throughout the week. But it was so cool.
You don't make eye contact either?
You don't, yeah, because it's kind of distracting or it's like a form of communication. But what's really cool is at the end of it, on the 10th day, when you get out of the silence, you're allowed to talk to people and you forge really deep bonds because you've kind of been through this really intense experience together
silently.
Yeah. And you're like, oh wow, we have so much in common even though we didn't talk for 10 days.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So do you meditate every day?
I do, yes.
How did you implement that into your everyday?
Oh man,
because I'm someone who tries to, but I can't. I like right now I'm at once a week.
Okay.
I'm trying to do like at least 5 minutes a day.
Yes.
But it's so hard to just make time for it.
It is really hard, yeah. And what I've found is often what I will, or the challenge that comes up is, well, there's so many other things I could be doing, right? I could be working, I could be reading, I could be, you don't even realize, but you might be scrolling or, whatever. I could be talking to someone. Like there's so many other things that feel more productive and feel like you will get something more out of it. You'll get that instant gratification from so many other things. So your mind is like, I don't want to do this. Like, what's the point? You're not going to get anything from it. It's not, your mind doesn't get it, right? So what I found is to make it as seamless as possible. Like I really like the idea of habit stacking, you know, where you have a habit already and then you add it to what you're already doing. So if it's like, okay, I get out of bed, brush my teeth, and then I immediately go sit for 5 minutes because you are going to get out of bed and brush your teeth every day, right? So I think that's really helpful. Another thing I found helpful is can you incorporate it into another routine, for example, with sleeping, like before you go to bed, can you do 5 or 10 minutes? And some people have said, but I'm so tired. Well, you can just turn on a recording and, it's so low friction now. Sleep meditations
are the best.
Sleep meditations are great. I think, they serve a different purpose than actually like sitting up and concentrating. But I think it's a great start. So I think making it as easy and seamless as possible. And it doesn't have to be super long every day. I think people are like, oh, I don't have time. But can you do it? If you're driving, you can't meditate. But if you're like commuting in public transport, can you just pay attention to your breath for a couple minutes? Or, maybe even when you're eating, like, can you be off of your phone and can you just focus on your food and focus on how it tastes and how it smells? There's so many ways to kind of incorporate it into your life.
Okay, well, what if you put me through like a 2-minute meditation?
Sure.
So that we can give an example for someone else who's hearing that they don't even need all of 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So, okay, let's go through.
Okay.
What do I need to do?
Okay, so you can just sit up straight and make sure your feet are on the ground. If you want to close your eyes, you can just close your eyes for a moment. And then just notice your posture. See if you can sit up a little bit straighter without, creating more tension. And just feel your feet grounding on the floor. Notice where your hands are falling. Maybe they're on your thighs. And just see if you can relax your shoulders a little bit. Maybe move your shoulders away from your ears. And then relax your face. And just notice how you're breathing right now. Notice your inhales and your exhales. Maybe slow them down a little bit. So inhale for a little bit longer, exhale for longer. And then just notice where you feel your breath. Maybe you feel it in your belly or your chest, your lungs. See if you can breathe more deeply into any of those areas. And then notice if you're holding tension in any other part of your body, maybe your jaw, maybe your your hips or your shoulders, and send the breath there. And with every exhale, you can just relax a little bit more, feeling yourself getting more grounded and supported by the chair, by the floor. And just take a couple more breaths. And then to come out, notice your points of contact between your feet and the ground and your sitting bones and the chair, maybe your back against the chair. Just notice those physical points of contact. Again, feeling super supported. And then take one more deep breath in and out. You can let your breathing return back to normal and then slowly open your eyes.
That was nice.
Yay.
That was only 2 minutes. That's crazy.
Really? I was probably around a couple minutes.
Yeah, that's nice. Oh my God.
It makes you feel a little bit more like settled.
Relaxed.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I feel like calm now.
Yay.
I was so hyper like right before I started. No, but that's like so good. Honestly, did you ever think about collabing with the Calm app and being one of the meditation people there?
Yes. No, I've definitely thought about it. I've because I like to do workshops or one-on-one and stuff, but people have asked me, they're like, oh, do you have anything online that I can, reference? And I'm like, yeah, I probably should record some stuff. So
honestly, yes, after that 20-minute one we did at Upasana's house, oh my God. I was like, she needs to do this full time everywhere.
Oh my gosh, thanks.
Do you hold classes and stuff?
So I was doing a bunch of online classes when I was in New York, and I was doing workshops here and there. I'm not doing them in Austin yet, but I am now with the new year. I'm like trying to find places and see what I vibe with. Because when I initially moved, I was like, okay, let me try out a few different places and see.
No, you definitely should.
Yeah.
You should also start adding sound bath.
Yes, I really want to do that too.
Oh my God, that was really good.
Yay.
Well, thank you for doing that for me.
Thank you for doing it.
And everyone who's listening, that all you need is 2 minutes of your day to just calm down, take a breath, and then bring yourself back to the present.
Yes, yeah. I feel like we're constantly, especially because we're so plugged in, we're at the mercy of a lot of external energies, right? We're like responding to people and taking in new information, and it's just really hard to we talk a lot about listening to your inner voice, but how can you do that if you're not allowing it to kind of come through, right? It's sort of being like squashed by everything else you're consuming. So I think it's really powerful. Even if you don't see the effects right away, I do think that it compounds over time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think over the years, even with therapy, it's taught me to calm down. But when I've implemented some sort of meditation or journaling, it's just like it forces you to just be like less reactive, I feel like, and also just more calm in every situation. Like you said, anything that you come across in your life or challenges, you're just like, you go head on, and you're like, I can do this. Yeah. And there'll be a freak out, but not as bad.
Yeah. And I like to describe it in a few different ways. One is that there's so few times in our modern lives, even if you're working, sometimes you'll be like checking your email or you're flipping between tabs, right? There's very few times in our day where we're just doing one thing. Yeah. Maybe even if you're washing the dishes, you might be watching a show with it, or, like we're constantly multitasking and doing multiple things that our brains are like really, really fried, and it does impact our brain waves. So it's a time of your day where you are just doing one thing, and that's really nice. Yeah. And in terms of the reactivity thing, what it really helps with, like there's a very, I wouldn't call it scientific, but like a way of how your brain kind of works when you're meditating. What it helps you do is create a longer pause between a trigger and your response to it. Yes. And trigger doesn't have to be negative. It could be anything, any kind of input, right? There's like an input, and what usually happens is like there's an input into our minds or in our external environments, and then right away we react because that's our body is just automatically reacting. Our brain is reacting. That's obviously how we've evolved, and that has helped us survive. That's how the human has evolved.
Mode,
exactly. You're like, okay, something happens, you have to react. You have to react, right? But what meditation allows you to do is create a pause between that, whatever is happening, and what your reaction is.
Yeah.
And so the longer that pause can be, obviously in appropriate situations, the more you're able to respond rather than react from a place of higher wisdom and insight.
And think clearly without like saying something that you regret too.
Exactly.
It's a big difference. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what got you into because I found you, I met you and then I realized you were on social media and you were like a part of your sisters.
Yes.
And I was like, wait, how did I not connect that? And because you said my name's Omika Jikaria and I was like, why have I heard that
You're like,
before?
that sounds familiar.
I literally heard that. So then I went and looked at your page and then we're like, oh shit, she's a part of the Jikaria sisters. So how did that started? How did you get involved in the social media space? And how was that?
Yes, it was a very wild experience. So I have 2 younger sisters. They're my soul siblings, my best friends, everything. They mean everything to me. They are 5 and 6 years younger than me, but we've always been very close. They're only like a year apart. But we were always close growing up, and we all grew up dancing together. So we just always had trained in ballet and various Indian styles since we were really small.
Yeah.
And we never really thought about social media as something that, we would use. But essentially what happened was March of 2020, we were all in school. So I was in grad school, my sisters were in college. And with the shutdown, we all went home to our parents' house. So our parents are in New York, and we were all at home in March. We thought we'd be home for like 2 weeks, as everybody did. And we were honestly just really bored. We were doing online classes, but there was nothing else like really happening in the world.
TikTok started, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I didn't even know what TikTok was because I'm a little bit older than them. But my youngest sister, who is a junior in college, she was like, oh, let's make some TikTok videos. Like, let's do this for fun. So we would just find random trends on TikTok and just start filming these videos. And if you go back to like our really old videos, they're not like, they're fine, but they're not, as polished as they are now. So we just started doing that, and then one thing kind of just led to the next, and we started putting like a desi twist on some of the trends, and then we started getting traction and started getting a lot of followers, and it was just like a snowball effect that we never thought would happen. But it was so cool because then it just opened our eyes up to what could be. And honestly, like for me, the biggest thing now that it's been literally 5 years, which is crazy since that started, the biggest thing I got out of it, honestly, was just that I got closer to my sisters. Like that was the main thing for us. We always say, we're sisters first, everything else second. And so it's just brought us so much closer together. And it's been a really cool opportunity to, share our passion and also connect with the community and work with different brands. And it just opened my eyes up to a whole new way of thinking and being on social media.
Are you guys still doing that part of social media as well?
Yeah, so it's definitely slowed down a bit.
Because you also now live here.
I live here, yeah. So they still try to do stuff in New York. And like I said, we were all in school when we started that. Yeah. So I think we had more bandwidth. Now we all have other full-time jobs as well.
Everyone has a life now.
Yeah. Like my middle sister went to law school, so she's like a full-time attorney now. My other sister's an engineer. I've been working in different business roles.
You three are so successful and smart. That's amazing.
Thank you. No, it's been so kind of priorities change, but we're still doing whatever we can, and now it's just a part of life and joy, and it's fun whenever it happens.
Oh my God, I love that. Sorry, excuse me.
No, you're good.
So do you still do dance on your own though? Because you on your Instagram page, I saw this awesome video you just posted, I think a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa. I didn't know she got it like that.
That's so
and then I went down a rabbit hole and I was like, oh shit.
Oh.
So how is that? Like when you're not dancing with them, does it feel weird to dance by yourself and do more projects by yourself?
Yeah.
Because now you're coming back into your own too, because you've moved away and now you still want an outlet as well.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like I feel this it's exciting, but I also feel a tinge of guilt, right? Because I'm like, oh, I just want to dance with them. But
also you have to do something for you too.
Yeah. And I think, we obviously have a lot of dance styles that we love doing together, but we also have different dance styles that we like doing. I've done a lot of Latin dance and other types of dance that I really enjoy. And they've done other things that they like more. So, I think it's important for us also to have our separate interests within dance. And I think for me, the big transition that has happened is I love social media so much, and it's brought me so many opportunities, and like wouldn't trade it for anything with them. I also think that, you know, as you start to like grow, initially we really started as a hobby, but I feel like as we started to grow, it became like, I hate to say it, but kind of a chore, right? Because you're like, okay, now I have to make it look this way, or this is what's trending, or this is what people want, or like this is what's gonna do well.
Or we
like,
have to do this because
exactly. And like to me that got a little bit exhausting, honestly.
What's the word? Taxing,
yeah. It is. It's like, it could be hard because you're like, okay, I got into this because I love making art, and I think at my core I like really tending to that creative side of me since I was really young. But when you start to grow in that way, it becomes like, oh, you know, you get nervous about what does my audience want? What do they want to see? And it's like, wait, does this even feel good to me? Right.
Yeah, you forget that it's about you. At the end of the day, your audience is going to follow you no matter what.
Exactly.
And if they don't, they don't.
Yeah. So I think that was a really big shift that happened for me, was like, okay, at what point do you kind of draw that line of like, okay, I don't want to do this, or I am going to do this because I am aligned, right? Like, what is aligned to you and what's going to work? And sure, there are trade-offs, but I don't know. I went through a lot of like soul searching in that way.
I mean, it makes sense because you guys did it for half a decade together, and then you left. And so were you the first one to like venture off and do your own thing?
I think we've all, I think geographically, sure. I think we've all kind of like, you know, had other interests and things, but, yeah, I think for dance, like they also will do their own thing sometimes. So I think for me now it's more like, okay, what does my creativity want to bring into the world? Like what are the messages I want to share? What does source want to channel through me? Like there's so much, it's like a bigger thing almost of like, okay, this is what makes me come alive. This is what I want to share with the world. And I have to trust that if I share myself authentically, like the right people will come to me too.
Oh, for sure.
And so it's kind of like a reframe. And, you know, I was also 26 when that started. That was like 5 years ago. So it's okay to not, you know, be the same person, right?
Oh, for sure. At 26, I don't even remember what person I was. Yeah. But also, because you were part of a group. So it's like Destiny's Child, right? When you leave the group. But you were part of a group. So it's probably so hard for you to also be like, guilt. You probably felt guilty, but also like, oh, you're a part of that. How could you do that?
Right.
You know, so I get it.
Yeah. But it's amazing because they're family and it's easy and like they, you know, we're also supportive of each other. So there's no bad blood, obviously.
Oh, of course not. That'd be crazy. Oh my God. No.
Yeah. So it is really nice to, you know, it's still in the family. So
no, I'm happy. I'm happy you're able to do your own stuff now and do your own creativity. Creative dance work and stuff. And it's so beautiful. So if you aren't following Omika on Instagram, you must, because she posts not only just meditation tips, even like brain tips, scientific, everything. Plus, you get a sprinkle of her dance projects in there.
That's so funny. I know. I feel like for the long, you know, you're kind of told like on social media, like, oh, find a niche, right? And I'm like, I am so confusing. And I am confused about myself. Me too. I'm just going to embrace all parts of me. And I feel like that's such a, like, we're all just human. We have so many aspects to us. And I'm like, if I'm not dancing, I'm not me, right? So I have to do that.
No, I feel like the niche thing is so overrated. I know a lot of people are like, if you have a niche, that's the only way you're going to grow. Maybe that is true for those people. And for certain people, for me, I was just like, maybe it's not just about growing. I want to show my true authentic self, what I do day to day, what I don't do, or when I work out. I work out every day, but that's not my fucking, I used to make it my like entire personality, but that's not me. Like I want to show you that I have 2 dogs and this is how we live our life, and life can be simple yet so much fun. And I don't know.
No, I love it. I feel like your personality shines through, and that's what people love. Is like people want to see real people.
Yeah,
and, like, that's so important.
Yeah, I don't like seeing people just show the same thing all the time, and I'm like, but what else do you do? Like, tell me your behind the scenes. Like, how did you get here? What is you know?
Vibe? Yeah.
No, niche is so like overrated. So I'm so happy you're not sticking to that only. Because I love your page. I get so many helpful advice. I've also saved a bunch of your videos too. So just know that if you're getting saves, it's probably me.
Oh my God, that's so sweet.
Or I'm just being a stalker.
No, that means a lot.
But when before, like, I know we still have a few minutes.
Yeah.
What are some like mindful tips you would give other people to like practice in their day-to-day, to slow down, and just people who are like just confused about how to start doing those things or implementing that into their life day to day. Not just the habit stacking, we talked about that earlier, but like how can they start? Like what if someone was just confused about it?
Ooh, yeah, that's a big question. I'll start with some that are coming to mind, but please ask follow-ups if anything resonates. I would say the one thing I've been really conscious of for the past few years is where my attention and energy are going. I think that's just, you know, I feel like we're all trying to figure that out, and it can feel really confusing. So I think the simplest thing for me is nailing down how I'm feeling in the morning and how I'm feeling in the evening. I think, you know, during the day, there's like very little you can control with work and everybody that's in your orbit. And I get it's really hard. Like, I don't believe that you need to have one specific morning routine or a night routine. I think different things work for different people. Different things work on different days. But is there one thing that you can commit to doing every morning or every night before going to bed? You know, even if it is just sitting for 5 minutes or, journaling. Even like sometimes I don't even do a full journal session, but I have like, you know, the 5-minute journal where you put your gratitude or whatever, right? It's like, okay, can you just make sure to do a couple things a day that kind of keep you grounded and make you feel in control of your energy and your attention. I feel like with social media, there are really great tips, and I feel like I've learned a lot. I'm sure a lot of people have learned a ton from it, but it's just an onslaught of information and advice.
It's like, what are you going to do after you listen to it? Yeah.
Exactly. Like there's just so much out there, and you're like, and then I think the trap you can fall into is like, oh my God, I feel bad about myself because I'm not doing these 10 things every day that this person told me to do. And that's not the point, right?
Yeah, that's not the point.
That's just gonna eat you up from the inside and gonna make you feel worse. I feel like so much of the tips we hear are like, you know, I think people tend to tie them to their self-worth, especially if, you know, like you and I, if you're really ambitious and you're high achieving, I think there's like a tendency to see all these tips and like then turn it into another project where you're like, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to check this off. And it's like, no, like that's just gonna make you feel worse. So like, what are the couple things you can do that aren't gonna make you feel crazy?
Yeah.
I feel like that's, you know, that's the ongoing challenge. Like, how do you have enough discipline, but also not make life too stringent, right? Like, you need to have discipline, obviously, that's a virtue, but you also can't like drive yourself insane.
Yeah. So one tip I've learned, I was listening to Jay Shetty's podcast, and he said like every night when he gets into bed before he falls asleep, in his head, he just says 3 things he's grateful for the day. And I feel like that really helps because you're already in bed. You don't have to go anywhere and do anything.
100%.
You just lay there and say 3 things you're grateful for the day. Yeah. Sometimes I say it out loud, sometimes in my head, or sometimes I ask Shay, I'm like, what were you grateful for today? And I feel like that's a really good one to implement into your nighttime routine, because that one's so easy. Or when you wake up, like, what are you grateful for? Just one thing.
Yeah, I think gratitude is really underrated because I think it takes you out of uncertainty, anxiety, or if you feel like, you know, I feel stuck, I don't know what to be doing, it just brings you back to the present also.
Also, like, I'm sure people get confused on how to even practice gratitude. So what are some things you would say? Like, for me, it would be, I'm so grateful for waking up today in this bed. You know, like, there's such simple things. Like, what would you say? Yeah. Because I feel like people don't know that they can just say the simplest things. They don't have to say something so crazy.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, you know, I'm grateful for a roof over my head, or I'm grateful for this nourishing meal I had today. I'm grateful for this meaningful conversation I had. I'm grateful for my income, or, you know, like so many little things that we just take for granted are actually things that you can be grateful for. And it's not toxic positivity. I think it's like, you have to be grateful for what you have before you can want more or have more.
Exactly. I feel like also toxic positivity is like something way different. Like, people are, when you're just like, everything's great, I'm not gonna think about the negative, that is toxic positivity. Like, even when we were meditating, when your thoughts are coming through, you don't push them away. Like, I feel like that's toxic when you're pushing your thoughts away. You're just like, you have to invite everything in.
Exactly.
Let it sit through.
Yeah.
Let it do their thing and then be like, okay, I don't need you right now. But thank you for reminding me.
Exactly.
That you're trying to protect me, because our brain tries to protect us. Our body tries to protect us. That's like something we have to learn to separate.
I love that. Yeah. And yeah, I think we've evolved, like, you know, like we mentioned before, in a really positive way. One thing I found too with meditation that I had this insight a couple months ago was I was feeling really frazzled and confused one morning, and I was like, I just feel like, you know, when you kind of just really feel anxious, you're like in your head and you're like, I just don't know what's going on. I feel like there's so much energy around me. And I was like, okay, let me meditate and sit and see what's going on. And what I realized was like, actually what I needed was to give myself attention, which is like a really weird way to put it. But I was just sitting there and I was like, oh, I feel better because I'm like watching myself, or like I'm like paying attention to that little girl who just like wants to be seen and heard. Yeah. And that was really powerful, because it's like, it kind of goes back to like the inner child stuff, but it was kind of just like, okay, I just needed someone to like sit there with me and listen. And there wasn't anyone with me, but I could actually do that for myself, which was like kind of weird.
Isn't it crazy?
It was cool. Yeah.
Oh my God, doing inner child work is so crazy. There was this one session my therapist and I did, and he's like, okay, just close your eyes. Imagine like you're talking to your younger self. And I was like, this is so weird. Yeah. But then I did it and I was like, I started crying. And I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy. Yeah. Like, you can imagine this? Like, I just like had this whole moment. You know, but when you talk about anxiety and mental health, how did that start for you? Like, how did you start putting that out there? Did you talk to your parents about it too? Like, how do they accept it? Because my parents, I didn't even tell them I was going to therapy till like 3 years in. Yeah. And then they were like, why? We gave you the best life. But they, obviously, they don't realize it's not about them. It's just it's for yourself. Yeah, it's for yourself, the way you experienced life, not because of them. But yeah, I mean, I think, like I mentioned, I definitely was feeling all the symptoms of it in high school. And like the high school I went to, I think a lot of people felt that way. It was kind of just the vibe. It was the vibe. We're all like this. It was a lot. But yeah, I don't think I might have brought it up to them, but I just really didn't have the vocabulary to talk about it. And I think that's why I initially went the route of like, okay, let me do the yoga and the meditation, which did help. But then it was actually not until I was 27 or 28 where I was like, okay, let me actually go to therapy. Yeah. And the reason I started going was specifically because I was having a lot of, like, I feel like I'd done all this work, but then I was having a lot of issues with men. Like, I would be in really toxic relationships or just be with around like emotionally unavailable people, and I was like, why does this keep happening to me? I don't understand. Because we're around that. I'm like, why am I attracting this, right? But in reality, it was just that I thought it was normal. So I was like, okay, maybe I should talk to someone who's not my mom, because I don't think my mom understands this. You know, like, she wants the best for me, but I don't think she has the tools to deal with it. That's when I started going to therapy, and we started to unpack a lot more stuff around it. And it did help me date in a much healthier way. I think it really helped me then create a healthier relationship with my partner now, and just like have more emotional maturity and awareness around it, around my own patterns and like what I was allowing, and my own self-worth, really. Like, I thought, oh, I'm so confident, I'm this and that, but I was allowing just like really bad behavior. So that really helped me. And then I don't even remember if I don't think I told my parents right away. But by that point, because it was like later in my 20s, we'd had more heart-to-heart conversations about like marriage and all the things, right? So I did bring it up to them. We don't really like talk. I mean, I think they're fine with it now, but I don't think they fully get it. Or we have other like other adult friend or other kids around our age whose parents do go to therapy. So I brought it up to our parents, and we're like, oh, like, do you guys want to go? And they're like, no way. Like, they're like, oh, that's like for crazy people. I tried that too. So we're just like, okay, we're not going to bring it up. I was like, and door shut. I tried that too. I was like, it's nice. No one thinks you're crazy. You should definitely do it. Exactly. Yeah. And it is nice now that at least in our generation it is pretty normal. I don't. Well, at least we're talking about it way more. I think so. Because I feel like it's still not as normal as it should be. Like, that's to talk about it, to put it out there, but. Yeah, we're definitely more vocal. Gen Z is like way more vocal, which I love, but our generation's kind of catching up. A little bit. At least the older millennials.
Yes.
Starting to catch up. Younger millennials, we're on it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it takes time, and it's like a gentle introduction.
For sure.
I think for the older generation, it's like maybe they have to really go through something to want to be open to it. With my mom, I had never even, like, even though I've been into yoga and wellness for a long time, it's not like people in my family were necessarily into it, even though, you know, a lot of it comes from India. But I took my mom on a yoga retreat for my 30th birthday last year. And it was her first time even trying any of that. And she went up, I didn't know that she was having a good time, but she went up to the teacher at the very end and she was like, oh my God, this was amazing. It was my first yoga class. Like, I'm definitely going to go back. It's so relaxing and self-love. And I'm like, really? Like, okay, she might not tell me, but you know, it's like a slow introduction. Yeah. So I think she's learning also how to take care of herself, which I don't think, I mean, I didn't really see her doing that growing up because she was just with us all the time. So yeah, it's like baby steps. Yeah,
my mom too. Like, she started taking care of herself, started like doing things for her. And I had to remind her, like, you know, you're allowed to do that. Because obviously when in their time they came to this country and they had to like be married and have a kid and take care of their in-laws who also they're so young, and then you have all this responsibility that they forget about themselves. Yeah. And so I had to remind my mom as well, and she was like, wow, this is what it feels like. I was like, yeah. It feels freaking amazing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you start giving a less shit about other people.
Right? Yeah. I mean, that's a big thing. Yeah. For them.
Exactly. The community, what are they going to think? What if they know that I have this problem, or I have anxiety? And I'm like, who the fuck cares? I'm pretty sure the people that are talking about it also have it. That's why they're talking about it.
Yeah. It's like you kind of have to be that pioneer first, and maybe it'll help someone else.
It's so hard in our community, though. I'm hoping that there's more open conversations, especially with parents. But I'm proud of the kids. They're doing so much better. Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. And parents are definitely more accepting now. At least they're forced to be. Because they're like, no, you need to talk about this.
Yeah. Well, I think as they see us getting older and just see us, or this is like a personal anecdote for me, it's like they've seen me go through more stuff. I think they have more empathy. They're like, oh, like, you know, the life that you're living is not the life that we were living at your age. So, you know, we get it. It's like you're going through different shit. Like, it's fine. Yeah. So they have more empathy now.
So yeah, you said you have your partner and you guys live together in Austin. Yeah. How was that for your parents when you guys first moved in? Was that... Because you guys aren't married, right?
No, we're not married.
Because that's a whole thing in our Indian community. Because I moved in with my now husband before marriage too. It was a whole thing.
Really?
It was crazy.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, everybody calm down.
You're like, it'll be fine.
It's gonna be fine.
Yeah. So surprisingly for me, I think because I met him when I'm not even old, but like I was old. Like, it just sounds weird to say that, but like I was 28, right? Anyway, which I guess in our community is different. But I think they had actually been, they weren't worried about me, but like both my sisters have been in very serious long-term relationships before. So I think for them, like it was the first time where they kind of paved the path instead of me being the oldest and like doing things for the first time.
Thank you, little sisters.
Yeah, thank you, finally. So I think for them it was like pretty normal. And my parents are pretty open-minded. Like I think they kind of feel conflicted because they're like, oh yeah, we want to keep the culture, but like we also want to be progressive. So like they're kind of open-minded, but then they like kind of have random feelings about things sometimes.
Oh yeah,
you know?
I mean, same with my parents. Yeah, they're modern sometimes, and then sometimes they're like really traditional. I'm like, wait, where did that come from? Because why is there no middle ground?
Exactly.
Here?
But I think for them, like my parents, luckily have been very. They call themselves like realistic. So like even when we'll go over to my parents' house, like they don't think it's weird that we'll all sleep in the same rooms as our partners, or like they're kind of like fine with it. And actually my middle sister had moved in with her boyfriend a couple years ago, so she was kind of the first one to do that.
Thank you, middle sister, for paving me that way for all
exactly.
of this.
So for me it wasn't even a thing. I think they were more like, oh, we're sad that you're moving to Austin. But I think they're like, my mom will like, it's like a whole thing because they're, you know, initially they're like, oh, don't talk to boys, and they're like, who are you dating? You know, get married, blah 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 blah.
Isn't that
now
crazy?
Now it's gotten to the point where we got engaged last May, and like we're still figuring out like wedding, like we don't even know if we want to do something big, like whatever.
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah, and when I went home a couple months ago, my mom's like, oh, she's like, so are you getting married? And I was like, yeah, like, you know, probably at some point. And she's like, well, I think you should just have a kid now. Like, don't just skip the wedding. And I was like, what? She's like, just have a kid. And I was like,
You're like, okay,
no.
that's a different level of progression.
Yeah, I was
That's
like, this
crazy.
is kind of weird. So I think at some point they're just like, oh, we just want grandkids. And I'm like, okay, not right now, but
I think it's so crazy that our community's like, don't talk to boys,
yeah,
but go get married.
right.
It's like, wait, where's the middle stage?
Yeah.
And then you're dating someone. Why are you dating someone?
Yeah.
You have to get married, but that's what you do to get married, right?
Exactly.
You like you have to go through the steps.
Yeah, and then that led to me going a lot of therapy. So
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
was like, I don't know what's going on. No one taught me how to do this.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, no one taught me how to do it either. And I'm glad like I met a lot of people my age that were going through the same thing, and we all just like held each other's hands through it, because without your girlies, I feel like it would just be 10 times harder.
For sure.
Especially in your Indian girlies.
Yeah. Luckily, my sisters are, again, they're younger, but I feel like they're wiser than me in some aspects. So I appreciate that.
I really love that, because I have an older sister, but our dynamic's a little different. She's blind, so she never got to experience the whole like dating around, or like her life was way different than mine. So I didn't have that, but I also have cousins who did do all that. So yeah,
You had some support.
Yeah, some support, but also a lot of girlfriends.
Yeah. Oh, that's
time.
nice.
Yeah. So I'm glad you had your little sisters to put you through it, because I don't know how you would have been able to navigate that by yourself.
Yeah. I don't think I would know.
Well, that's good. Well, last thing before we end. What are some ways that you have implemented more self-care into your life ever since, like, you said, wait, oh my God, we forgot to talk about your Ghana trip. Oh my God. Before we end, one self-care, and then we'll get to the last part is your Ghana trip. And so yeah, tell me about your self-care tips that you implement into your day-to-day now.
Yeah, so it's really shifted for me, because I had lived alone for a really long time, like basically for all of my 20s. And now that I'm living with someone, I think the biggest shift for me is like, how do I make that time for myself? And, we do things together, but like, how do I do things for myself?
Yeah.
So one thing that I have been trying to do is this concept that I learned in this book called The Artist's Way. It's by Julia Cameron. And it's all about kind of what we were talking about earlier, about how to let your creativity flow, and how to use that as a form of healing, of self-care, acceptance, and expression in the world. I really believe like creativity can be so powerful. And she talks about like morning pages, so, journaling and whatever, that's fine. But she also talks about something called an artist's date, where you take yourself on a date, like let's say once a week, doing something that, one, you're doing it solo, and you're doing it to inspire your creativity. So for me, that could be like going to a dance class, or going to a museum, or, just doing something that kind of like gets the juices flowing, that feels different and novel from my day-to-day routine.
Oh my God, I love that. I need to do that too.
So I have really loved that, especially, again, being in a relationship now, and like, how do I make that time for myself? Of course, I do like the meditation and the workouts and like sauna and whatever. I think that stuff is,
no, but like you said,
normal.
something into the creativity.
It's different. And so that's been something that I want to continue this year.
I love that. Oh my God, thank you for sharing, because I will totally start doing that now. But we have 4 minutes left. Now you're gonna have to tell me about your trip in 4 minutes.
Okay.
You went on a solo trip.
Yeah.
And I think that's so amazing. You went to Ghana.
Yeah.
And you did a music festival.
Yeah.
How was that, going on your first solo trip like that?
Yeah. So I had traveled a bunch solo in my 20s, especially when I lived abroad. That was like very normal, because I was like, I'm not going to wait for anyone to do what I want, like work-wise, living. So
it's because I've never done anything like that. So I'm like, how did you do that?
Yeah. So for me, I feel like when I was younger, it was actually much easier to do, because I had fewer responsibilities. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pack up. I'm going to like go do this volunteer program. I'm going to go work in this different country. Like that was my life for a long time, especially in my early 20s when I was like single and just traveling and living in different places. And I had very little inhibitions about it. I was like, it's fine and I'm free and it's amazing. And I feel like as I've gotten older, I've like put all these artificial constraints on myself. Like, oh, I have to do this, or I have to be more serious. I have to be more mature. I have to like move in with someone, which are all great things. But like, how do you maintain that sense of playfulness and independence as you get older is something that I've been noodling on. And so I found, maybe you've heard of Dose of Travel, but she's a really cool solo traveler. So she has a club that does these trips. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go on this random trip. I hadn't traveled all year because of all my big transitions. And I was like, I'm just like craving going somewhere and doing something for myself. So I found it. It was over New Year's. I really love Afro beats and dancing and checking out a new country. So yeah, I went and it was amazing. Like I met the coolest people. They were all like very well traveled and adventurous and curious. And it was just so fun. It was like a really good break to the routine, especially just after the crazy weird year I had. Yeah. It was just so nice, and it kind of reminded me like you can get older and still do things that are really cool, and like it's not just something you have to do in your 20s. So
and you don't have to always be with your partner to do it. Right?
Yeah. And I'm so lucky. He's like so supportive and understanding and like cool about it.
That's awesome. What was the best part of that trip?
Honestly, probably meeting all those new people, because they were, like I said, just very independent and free and curious. It was like really fun to kind of just put myself out there. I feel like I haven't. I feel like when you're younger, you meet a lot of new people, but as you get older, it's
very hard. So. Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being here and yapping with me for the last hour.
Having me. Yeah.
Of course, I'm very grateful for your time. Yeah. So, and thank you for sharing all this with our audience here today.
I'm so excited.
And thank you all for listening in. I hope you have a great day today, and I love you so much. Tune in every week on Tuesdays for new episodes.